In an unexpected live event clash, Kanye West tried to cut off Ibrahim Traoré, but what Tro did next left the entire crowd in awe. His calm yet powerful response silenced the room and showed everyone what true composure and leadership look like. This unforgettable moment has gone viral for all the right reasons. The air inside the auditorium was electric. Hundreds of people had gathered for the live global broadcast titled Voices of Change, an event featuring artists and world leaders speaking about unity and hope. President Ibrahim Traoré had just stepped up to the podium. Dressed simply in his brown uniform, he scanned the crowd calmly, his presence alone commanding respect. But as he began his opening words about dignity and resilience, something no one expected happened. Kanye West suddenly stormed onto the stage. Clutching the microphone, Kanye interrupted, his voice loud and erratic. Nah, I gotta say what's real. We don't need no politicians telling us how to feel. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters murmured. Ibrahim stood there perfectly still. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. And in that tense moment, with the whole world watching, people wondered how would he respond. The silence stretched, suffocating. And then Ibrahim Traoré gently extended his hand toward Kanye. The crowd froze as Ibrahim held his hand out. Kanye blinked, clearly thrown off by the gesture. Ibrahim leaned closer to the mic and with a calm yet firm voice said, "Brother, before you speak, let me say this. On this stage, we don't fight with words, we build with them." The room went silent again. Kanye looked at him confused, but Ibrahim continued, "You have something to say, I believe you. But cutting off another man mid-sentence only means you're afraid of what he has to say. So I will step back, and after I finish the mic is yours." That is how respect works. The crowd broke into applause slowly at first, then louder and louder. Kanye's shoulders dropped slightly, his eyes wet with something between anger and shame. And for the first time in years, the superstar didn't have a quick comeback. He stepped back. Ibrahim nodded once and turned back to the audience. In that instant, the internet exploded. Clips of the moment began to circulate with captions like, "This is how you lead." As Ibrahim continued his speech, the energy in the room changed. People leaned in, hanging on every word. He spoke about listening, truly listening, even when it's hard. He spoke about dignity and disagreement. He spoke about his mother teaching him that humility is not weakness. And then, with everyone still watching, he turned to Kanye and said softly, "Brother, when I finish, please share your truth. We need your voice, too." Kanye stared down at his shoes, visibly moved. By the time Ibrahim concluded, the applause was deafening. Even the cameras caught Kanye wiping at his eyes. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't grab the mic right away. Instead, he walked up to Ibrahim, placed a hand over his heart, and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. I didn't expect you to show me that kind of grace. Thank you." And for the first time that night, the crowd rose to their feet. Not for a celebrity, not for a politician, but for a leader who showed what real composure and courage looked like. As Ibrahim continued his speech, the whispers among the audience grew louder. Reporters exchanged glances, pens frozen mid-note. Behind him, Kanye paced, gripping the mic tightly. Some of the younger attendees began recording on their phones, sensing something historic. Then Kanye abruptly cut in again, his voice louder this time. "That's easy for you to say," he said, interrupting Ibrahim mid-sentence. "Standing there in your uniform, talking about humility, but what about the people who feel silenced?" A murmur of shock rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed in on Ibrahim's face, waiting for him to snap back, but he didn't. He paused, letting the silence stretch like a taut string. Then he turned to face Kanye fully, his eyes soft but steady. "Kanye," he said quietly, "I hear your pain, and maybe this is your way of saying you don't feel heard. But cutting someone down doesn't lift you up. Why don't you join me up here?" The room gasped. Kanye froze, his lips parted, unsure. For the first time that evening, Kanye looked unsure of himself. Ibrahim motioned for a chair to be brought to the stage and placed it next to the podium. He walked over, pulled the chair out, and gestured to Kanye to sit. "Kanye," he said, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium, "you deserve to speak. You deserve to be heard, and you deserve to do so in dignity." Kanye stared at him, his hands trembling slightly, and then sat down. The cameras caught it all, the defiance in his eyes softening into something more vulnerable. Ibrahim turned back. To the crowd, this is what we must learn: that we can stand next to each other, not above each other, and still disagree. The applause came slowly, hesitant at first, then building into a wave. Even the security guards at the back nodded quietly to one another. Kanye lowered his head, and for a moment it seemed like he might cry. Ibrahim gently placed a hand on Kanye's shoulder and said, "We are more than our anger, brother. Speak your truth when I finish. That is your right, and it is my duty to protect." That right by now, social media had exploded. Hashtags about the event trended worldwide. Clips of Ibrahim's calm composure flooded feeds with captions like, "This is what leadership looks like." In the auditorium, everyone leaned forward as Ibrahim finished his original speech. He spoke of rebuilding trust in a divided world, of giving space to the unheard, and of how leaders should never see themselves as kings, but as servants. Kanye watched him intently now, his anger giving way to something more complicated: respect, maybe even shame. When Ibrahim finished, he handed Kanye the mic without a word and stepped aside. Kanye stood there, eyes glossy, breathing heavily. He looked at Ibrahim, then at the crowd, and finally at his own shoes. He began, his voice cracking, and then he stopped, overcome by emotion. The camera zoomed in as he lowered the mic, whispering softly, "I didn't come here to cry." The audience held its collective breath. Ibrahim put a reassuring hand on his back, and at that moment, even the most skeptical in the crowd could see it. This was no ordinary politician. This was a man with a heart big enough to hold even his harshest critic. The air in the auditorium was so thick you could almost hear the sound of hearts beating. Cameras flashed like fireflies, trying to capture every second of what had just happened. Kanye stood frozen next to Ibrahim, the microphone still trembling in his hand. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected, but it wasn't awkward. Ibrahim simply waited. He didn't rush him, he didn't scold him, he didn't even look impatient. He just stood there, dignified, giving Kanye the gift of space to find his words. Finally, Kanye's voice cracked through the quiet. I thought I was proving something," he admitted, staring at the floor. "I thought cutting you off would make people hear me." Ibrahim stepped closer, lowering his own mic. "And what did you hear when you cut me off?" he asked softly. Kanye lifted his eyes, and they were wet. "Nothing," he whispered. "I heard nothing." The audience gasped at his honesty. Ibrahim nodded as if he already knew. "That's the thing about anger," Ibrahim said gently. "It makes so much noise you can't even hear yourself." And then, for the first time all evening, Kanye smiled just a little. Somewhere in the crowd, a young woman began to cry quietly at first, then openly sobbing. Others soon followed, not out of sadness, but from something deeper. It was rare to see two powerful men stand on the same stage and strip away all ego, all performance, all pretense. One reporter whispered to her colleague, "This is history." Right here on stage, Kanye handed the mic back to Ibrahim. His shoulders slumped now, but it was the slump of relief, like someone finally setting down a heavy load. Ibrahim didn't raise his voice to the crowd. He didn't even speak right away. Instead, he placed his hand on Kanye's shoulder and said just 2 words, "Thank you." Kanye's eyes went wide, and then he started crying too. For a moment, no one moved. Even the camera operators wiped at their eyes, unable to hold back the emotions sweeping through the room. And then Ibrahim finally turned back to the audience and said softly, "If we can give each other this kind of grace, even in our worst moments, then we will all win." Applause erupted long and thunderous, but for many, the tears kept falling. After the event ended, the viral moment was already exploding across every platform. Millions shared clips titled, "Leadership Defined, Kanye Meets His Match," and "The Power of Calm." But for Ibrahim, the night wasn't over. Back in his hotel room, as he loosened his tie, his phone rang. It was a video call from Kanye. Kanye's face filled the screen. His eyes were still red from crying. I don't know what to say." Ibrahim smiled gently. "You already said it out there," he replied. Kanye shook his head. "No, not everything. I need to say thank you. Not just for tonight, for reminding me who I am, who I want to be." There was a long silence between them, but this one was comfortable, almost warm. Then Kanye said something that stunned Ibrahim. "If you ever need a voice, someone to tell the world what you're really about, I'm your man." Ibrahim chuckled softly, humbled. "We all need each other, Kanye. That's the lesson." And though they hung up soon after, both men sat for a while, reflecting on a night they'd never forget. That night, after the unforgettable live event, Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly in his hotel suite. The applause from the crowd still echoed in his mind, but what stayed with him most were Kanye's eyes, wide, tear-filled, finally humbled. His phone buzzed with hundreds of messages and mentions from around the world, but it was one email from Ouagadougou that stopped him cold. It was from a mother in Burkina Faso, simply titled, "Thank you," she wrote of her son, a boy who once dreamed of becoming a leader but grew bitter and angry, thinking kindness was weakness. "Tonight," she wrote, "he called me in tears. He said, 'Mama, I want to be like President Trump. I want to lead with my heart.'" Ibrahim's throat tightened. He closed his eyes and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. This was why he endured the long days and sleepless nights. This was why he chose service over comfort. For that boy, for every boy and girl who needed to see that strength, wasn't measured in how loud you shouted, but in how quietly you stood firm when others expected you to fall. By morning, the clip of Ibrahim and Kanye had reached over 50 million views across platforms. Comment sections overflowed with words like inspiring, beautiful, and true leadership. A teacher in Chicago posted, "Showed this to my fifth graders. Today, not a dry eye in the room." A veteran from the UK tweeted, "He reminded me why I served. Respect." Even celebrities who hadn't been there began sharing the clip, calling it a masterclass in humility and strength. But Ibrahim didn't dwell on the fame. He met with his team that morning and reviewed the next steps of his visit. Still focused on the mission at hand, advocating for African unity, dignity, and opportunity. When one advisor tried to show him the latest headlines, he just smiled and said, "Let the headlines speak for themselves. I have work to do." That afternoon, at another event, a young girl came up to him timidly and whispered, "My papa cried last night because you forgave that man. He said he believes in people again." Ibrahim knelt down, looked her in the eyes, and softly replied, "That is all I ever hoped for." That evening, Kanye sent an unexpected message. He asked if Ibrahim would meet him privately before flying home. Though exhausted from a week of nonstop events, Ibrahim agreed.